What's up everyone, this is Vesper, and this is a video that's long overdue. We're going to go over the mechanics this time of Street Fighter V. Basically, we're going to go over the game itself. Now the problem is, Capcom hasn't given us any information about the game mechanics and things like that, so we're basically just going to wing it with the footage that we have, but we have some additional footage. This is from the recent Taipei gaming show where we all sat for hours waiting on the stream for us to show some footage, and none was provided. Luckily, Kirby from Event House was gracious enough to allow me to use his footage, and I'll provide a link back to the original footage right here. Also, don't forget that I did a breakdown on Ryu and Chun-Li, and if for some reason you guys missed those videos, I'll also provide a link above as well. Okay, so where should we start? Let's start with the interface. Now, the interface looks pretty plain Jane right now, but of course, it's probably a placeholder, right, Capcom? But yeah, let's start off with the timer. That's right, guys, we're going to talk about the timer in Street Fighter V. Now the clock does tick down in real time, and by real time I mean that 99 seconds is actually 99 seconds in the game. And from all the information that I gathered, I can see that the timer still ticks down no matter what's happening in the game, and this is including the startup animations to the ultras. Now this is important to know because this means that you can still timer scam the opponent just like you could in Street Fighter 4, for example. So for example, if you have a life lead over your opponent and there's only like 3 seconds left on the clock, you can just go straight into your ultra without worry, and then they're stuck watching the dumb animation, and then the round is over when you win by life lead. But of course we only have in-game footage of Ryu and Chun-Li, so we can't really see a big variance on like what the different ultras look like. We do know that Chun-Li and Ryu's startup animation for their ultras are actually quite short. They're like 2 seconds tops. But when the animation hits, of course, they are longer, especially Chun-Li's. If you land Chun-Li's Ultra in Street Fighter V, it lasts for about 6 seconds, that animation, and Ryu's is only a second at best. And while we're on the topic of Supers and Ultras, I'm not really a fan of long animations. I know they're great when you see them the first time, they're really flashy and stuff like that, but damn do they get annoying after you see it like the millionth time. And I prefer more of the King of Fighters approach where they're really short but they still look great. That style is perfect in my opinion. Like, come on man, when Abel does his Ultra, we're all growing beards before it even ends. And look at Cross Tekken, man. Like, Street Fighter Cross Tekken has so many timer issues. There's just so many extended animations in that game, and the stages were so huge, and just everything put together, the timer was like the worst enemy in that game engine. Okay, so let's move on to the health bars now in Street Fighter V. Damn, you take a lot of damage in this game. Like, Street Fighter 2 style is a lot of damage. But we don't know if this will be the final build, because you know, this was just from the stage demo. Now, high damage definitely does speed up the pace of Street Fighter V. Notice how I said pace, because there's a lot of concern right now for the speed of the actual gameplay. Now, in terms of damage scaling, I think it's a little too early to check that out right now. I don't even think Capcom has even implemented it yet. But I still would like to talk about it. Damage scaling in general in Street Fighter 4 I think was way too high. And if you guys don't understand what I mean by damage scaling, basically, for example, when you do a combo, the first 2 hits is 100% of the damage, and then it goes down to 80, and then 70, and so on, and it goes all the way down to 10%. And I think that's just way too low, man, because I think the reason they did that is they wanted to close the gap between expert players who are able to do long, amazing combos compared to newer players who are doing the old-fashioned jumping hard kick, crouching hard kick. They didn't want to give the expert players too much of an advantage. The problem is that when you get down to 10%, when you're literally doing like no damage, that's a little too harsh. It basically encourages players to keep their combos short, and I don't actually agree with that because I do think you should be rewarded for high execution. Now, in Marvel 3, from what I remembered, the Supers didn't have scaling in that, or at least the level 3s didn't, but something like that would also be nice too, so that if you do get a huge amount of scaling in your combos and then you end it with an Ultra, for example, the Ultra should not suffer the same amount of scaling at least. So it's at least worth it to do long combos into Ultra. Also in Street Fighter 4, there's a passive amount of damage reduction from all attacks when you are at a certain amount of life. So for example, when you're less than half health, you would take, I think, 5% less damage from all attacks. And when you're as low as like 15% health, you would take 25% less damage from all attacks. And this was basically used for, I don't really know how to say it, a hype mechanic, I guess, to make matches seem like they're closer than they actually are at the end. And this is not just in Street Fighter 4, this is in a ton of fighting games, so I wouldn't be surprised if they have it in Street Fighter V as well. Now when you get hit in Street Fighter V, you'll see a red portion of the health bar, and it shows exactly how much health you lost basically, and it stays on the screen for a long time. In fact, it will stay for the entire combo. So it basically is it's good for the viewers, the audience, to see exactly how much damage your combo did. And if you hit somebody and the red part of the health will actually disappear after just a little bit, like a second or two. But if you do another hit that's not like a combo, not a consecutive hit, the red part of the health will disappear immediately, and then it'll show the other portion of it. It's always keeping track of the amount of damage of the present attack. It's just a little detail that I personally like, that just so you can see the damages a little better. Even when the opponent is stunned or dizzy, the red portion of the health still stays on the screen until you finish your entire combo. I would assume it would disappear when they go back to neutral when they recover from the stun. Now we see that you still take chip damage in Street Fighter V, which is permanent damage when you block special attacks or ultras. The big difference is that it seems like you cannot lose the round from chip damage anymore. So if you have 0 health and you block a special attack or an ultra, it won't chip you out. You can't cheese the opponent, which is a really weird change. I'm not sure if this is intended, if they're going to keep this mechanic in the game, but what do you guys think about this? Not being able to chip your opponent out. I guess it would make the game more fair, I guess, but chip damage is something that's always been in Street Fighter, and you play around it, and you basically corner your opponent, so to speak, into forcing him to make an action. You can't just block all day and be impervious to all attacks. Speaking of blocking attacks though, the biggest change to the life bar by far is the fact that you take recoverable damage from all blocked normal attacks. Now when I say recoverable damage, I mean that when you block a normal attack, a gray portion of your life bar will be taken off, and if the opponent doesn't land a clean hit on you for a little bit over a second, the gray portion will start to recover and you'll regain all that health you lost, but only the gray portion of it. This is very similar in Street Fighter 4, that when you used your focus and you absorbed an attack, you would also get that gray portion, and it would of course recover over time. The more attacks that you block before you recover this gray damage, the more it stacks. So this basically means that block strings are more dangerous than they ever were, because now if the opponent keeps stacking the amount of recoverable damage on you and you have all this gray health and then he lands a clean hit afterwards, you're going to take all that damage, and that's going to be a lot in this game. A lot of people want the guard crush meter to return to Street Fighter V, including myself, and it doesn't look like we're going to get it, but this looks something really similar in the sense that if your opponent blocks forever, he is open up to a lot of potential damage if you land a clean hit on him. It definitely rewards somebody with an offensive style of play, but I think it also would reward someone with a defensive style too, which I'll explain in a second here. But like I said, this contributes to the pace of the game as well. Like I said, not just the speed of the attacks and stuff, but the pacing, in the sense that the matches will seem shorter because you're always taking damage, and the damage seems rather high right now. One more thing I'd like to add about recoverable damage is that when you block special attacks, when you take chip damage, it does not take away the gray portion of your health. So they're both separate things, in other words. Now, in between the life bar and the timer, there's a little portion on the interface that basically tells how you won the round. And so far we've only seen a V and a CA. The V probably stands for victory, just like your standard win. But then there's also a CA, and this happens when you win the round with an Ultra. I'm not really sure what it stands for. What do you guys think it stands for? It's been suggested to me that it stands for comeback art, because the A would stand for art because in Third Strike they were called super arts. But what do you guys think it stands for? Now in past Street Fighter titles, there was also a C that you get for winning the round with chip damage. I think it stands for cheese. And it's just from past games, but I don't think we'll be seeing that anymore. Okay, let's talk about the revenge meter now. Now the revenge meter is really similar to Street Fighter 4's Ultra meter, in the sense that it's a comeback mechanic. It fills when you're getting hit, and the funny thing is that in the previous builds of Street Fighter 4, the alpha and beta footage, it was actually called a revenge meter as well, which I can show you a screenshot here. Now when your revenge meter in Street Fighter V fills up halfway, it starts pulsing, and basically you're able to do your Ultra at that point. Now, I say Ultra, but it's more like a hybrid in Street Fighter V, because it acts like a Super and an Ultra in the sense that you can cancel all of your attacks into Ultra now. You couldn't do that in Street Fighter 4. In Street Fighter 4, Ultras, to combo into them, they had to be linked from your attacks. Now after your revenge gauge reaches the halfway point, and you're able to finally do your Ultra, The more damage you take, and thus the more your revenge gauge fills, the more damage your ultra will do. Well, we're assuming the more it will do. Now, so far, it sounds exactly like the ultra meter in Street Fighter 4, but there is a difference. The difference is that the revenge meter in Street Fighter 5 is in complete tandem with your life bar this time. So, what I mean is, once it reaches the pulsing part of the revenge meter, when it hits 50%, you would have took 50% damage. Your health bar would be half if you just took clean hits all the way. This means that you won't get a 100% revenge meter until you're dead, basically. So the only other way to reach it earlier is when you're actually taking recoverable damage, the gray part of your health, and you're recovering from it. So this is different. In Street Fighter 4, your revenge meter was maxed out completely once you hit like 80% damage, basically. So this is what I meant when I was talking about recoverable damage, about how your defense can actually reward you from this mechanic as well, because if you are good at blocking and you're constantly recovering health from all the gray damage that you're taking from normal attacks, then you'll naturally be able to do your ultra earlier, and you'll be able to get that 100% revenge gauge before you die. So I feel that the ultras in this game are much more dangerous because you can cancel into them, so it'll be much easier to combo into them, of course. So the comeback mechanic is stronger in that sense, but it's also weaker because you're not going to get 100% full damage ultra unless you're good at blocking and you took a lot of recoverable damage basically and healed from it, because you'll be dead once you get 100%, like I said, if you just took all clean hits. So it kind of forces you to use your ultra earlier than normal than you would in Street Fighter 4, than letting it, max out kind of thing. Hope you guys know what I mean. One last thing I'd like to add about the revenge gauge is that it does not carry in between rounds, just like the ultra meter in Street Fighter 4. And of course, once you do your ultra that round, it depletes the entire bar. Okay, let's go over the EX bars at the bottom now. So right off the bat, you can tell there's a big difference already. Ryu can have up to 2 bars of EX, and Chun-Li can have up to 3. This was different from Street Fighter 4, where no matter what character you picked, you had 4 bars. So what can you use your EX bar for in Street Fighter 5? We know that EX moves have returned to Street Fighter 5, which is basically just powered up versions of your special moves that cost a single bar. Now in Street Fighter 5, when your EX meter is completely full, you're able to use up the entire meter to activate your rumored V trigger, which is something that enhances your character passively and actively in a lot of different ways, which I covered in my previous breakdowns. Now with Street Fighter V, so far from the footage that we've seen, you seem to gain a lot of meter quite fast in this game. A lot more than Street Fighter 4, and that makes sense because it looks like you're going to be using your V trigger quite a bit throughout the match. This introduces a new type of meter management dynamic, because now if you use your EX special move, you're not going to be able to do your V trigger because you need a full bar to do it. So you're going to have to decide whether it's worth it to do it for more damaging combos or to conserve it so you're able to power up your character during the round. Of course, your EX bar does carry over between rounds, so you can save it for the beginning of the round as well, just like you could in Street Fighter 4. Another thing is that it looks like supers are gone from the game now. The difference is when you activate your V trigger, when you spend your entire EX meter, and then you do your ultra, it's enhanced in some way. This is of course speculation, but from all the footage that we have and all the information we gathered, this makes the most sense. We know for sure that there's more than one ultra. With Ryu, for example, we know he has a Denjin and he has a Shinku version of his ultra. So we do know that there's an option to spend your entire EX meter and your entire revenge meter to do one big ultra attack. So far, I like this mechanic, because in Street Fighter 4, there were a lot of supers that were actually pretty good, but you were forced to use your meter for a ton of different things too, like your EX moves of course, and the FADC system as well. And basically, with Street Fighter V, you're now able to use your entire meter and then still gain meter while your V trigger is active, and you're still able to do these other things with the bar as well, and still maintain this large ultra attack. So I just like it a little bit better. One last thing I'd like to add about the EX bar is that you do not gain meter when you whiff normal attacks like in Third Strike. Sorry guys, I know some of you guys wanted that back. And you don't gain much bar when the opponent blocks your attacks, but of course you gain a ton of meter when they get hit by your attacks. And if you whiff special moves, you just throw them out like fireballs and that, you gain a little bit of bar, but not too much. Now for the V-trigger mechanic itself, I will be kind of brief on this because I did go over it quite in depth in both my Ryu and Chun-Li breakdown. Okay, so we know that you can cancel into your V-trigger activation from special moves so far. We don't know if you could do it from normal attacks, because we haven't seen it yet. We've seen it from Chun-Li's Fireball and she activated it, and Ryu's Dragon Punch, and then he activated afterwards as well in one of the trailers. Now when you activate your V-trigger, there's a certain amount of startup frames before it activates. Now this is really important to know because a lot of people like to compare this to the FADC system, where you could do something like, for example, in Street Fighter 4, you go Dragon Punch, FADC into Ultra, for example. But in Street Fighter 5, if you go Dragon Punch and you activate, you might not have enough time because Ryu has to do the startup of the activation, and then the character might fall from that point. But we don't know for sure. All we know is that it's not a fluid cancel like it was in Street Fighter 4. Keep in mind, I mentioned that Ryu and Chun-Li have different amounts of startup time on their V-trigger. Chun-Li's is a little bit faster than Ryu's, so there might be some characters where they could activate instantly, for example, and there might be some characters that take a really long time to activate and they have something really powerful, for example. Also, the second you activate, so let's say for example that to activate V-trigger, it's medium punch and medium kick at the same time. The second you press those buttons, you lose your entire meter right off the bat. And if you get hit during those startup frames, if you're Ryu, for example, if you get hit, you lose your V-trigger instantly, and you lose all your bar instantly. This happened to Daigo during the Taipei match. So you have to be really careful if you're going to activate this thing raw, because you're really vulnerable, and you can lose your entire EX bar for nothing. We also know that the screen freezes momentarily when you activate, but it seems like you're frozen as well. This can be useful in the sense that, let's say you activated and then you see your opponent was mid-air during a jump, and you're like, oh, he jumped, so you have enough time to process, okay, I'm just going to Dragon Punch him as he's coming at me, things like that. You know, you have enough time to see the situation and then have an extra second to react to it. We do know that you're still able to gain EX meter after you activated your V-trigger, so while it's active you still gain bar. We don't know if your V-trigger carries between rounds, and we also don't know how long your V-trigger actually lasts for. But for Chun-Li, for example, it lasted a really, really long time. We also don't know if you can activate your V-trigger after you already activated your V-trigger, so we don't know if you can go even further beyond. Lastly, it doesn't look like you're able to activate it in the air, at least for Ryu and Chun-Li. Alright, moving on to on-screen messages. First off, we have first attack. It's written in light blue letters. What does it do? Absolutely nothing. Moving on. Counter hit, written in yellow letters. I think it's safe to assume that counter hits still do what they did in previous Street Fighter games, and that gives you additional frame advantage on hit and a little bit more damage. To land a counter hit, you have to hit the opponent during the startup frames of his attack. One big difference in Street Fighter V though is that there are specific attacks in the game that give you an extra amount of frame advantage when you land a counter hit. Take Ryu for example. When you hit him with his mystery move that looks like a standing hard punch, the character spins around a few times and they're stunned for days. And it looks like mostly hard versions of attacks so far with the footage that we've seen. And this is not new. Like, this is something that was introduced in Street Fighter Cross Tekken, I believe. And there were certain moves in that when you get counter hits, you get extra bonuses. You stun the opponent for longer than usual. Honestly, I'm most impressed by the counter hit system in this game, which is funny because if I was a game designer for Street Fighter V, I would want to focus on the strong points of Street Fighter, and one of those things I think is the neutral game, which involves a lot of footsies. We don't want to enforce footsies, we don't want to force people to play that style, but we want to entice it. We want to encourage people to use it. And this new counter hit system for Street Fighter V is a huge leap in that direction, I feel. As a basic example, let's say Ryu's standing hard punch does that big counter hit where it makes the opponent spin around in circles. You would say to yourself as a player, you'd be like, okay, this is a really powerful attack and I need to find a way to land a counter hit with this. How do I do that? It's already like a step in the right direction for helping new players, new to their character, and just laying out a simple strategy. Next up we have reversals, written in red letters. It looks like the window for doing reversals is still really big in Street Fighter V. We don't know for sure, but it's something that I think Capcom's not going to change. One quick thing to add though is you can do a reversal after you do a technical. Now the technical message is written in green letters and we've seen it 3 different times. 2 is from 2 different types of quick rises. So when you get a soft knockdown, you can do a quick rise on the spot, and I'll show you guys a clip of that. And you can do a quick rise by flipping backwards. It's not quite a roll like in Cross Tekken, and you don't really go that far back, but it does change your wake up position. And we don't know if there's one for like a forward movement, and we don't know if you're vulnerable from it either. I'm not really a fan of too many wake up options, especially on hard knockdowns, so I'm hoping they don't really add any. Like delayed wake up, for example, was mostly used to stop unblockable setups in Street Fighter 4. But I think that if you get a hard knockdown on somebody, you should be rewarded for it. So I don't really like the idea of the opponent constantly getting crutches to escape. It also brings down the clock quite a bit too, and it's one of the reasons why in Cross Tekken the clock was just draining so hard, was because from those non-punishable rolls. Now the third technical message we've seen in the Daigo vs GamerB match, we see that GamerB attempts to throw Daigo and he successfully techs it. Finally, we have stun, which is written in purple letters. This is your typical Dizzy. We don't have a stun meter in Street Fighter V, and it looks just the same. Oh yeah, there's actually one more on-screen message I forgot to mention. That's the combo counter. The combo counter in Street Fighter V, it actually updates in real time now. So what I mean is, as you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4 hits, the combo counter is actually ticking right after each hit. It doesn't appear when your combo is done. So it's not like Street Fighter 4, which is it's a subtle change, but I like this change because sometimes when you're watching a tournament match or something and someone does a bunch of hits and you don't actually know if it was a reset or not until like the round is over, and then you see the combo counter appear, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't know, it's a good change. And when Chun-Li gets knocked into all those dishes in the restaurant and then that noodle bowl falls on her head, I thought it was pretty funny that it counted as an extra hit for the combo. Okay, so that's it for the interface and the on-screen messages. Let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about throws. Now, you haven't seen too many throws in Street Fighter V yet, but we do know that the range is actually quite small. I got a clip here where Combo Fiend attempts to throw Mike after he whiffs a Dragon Punch, and he's like right next to him, man, and then he whiffs the throw. And this really worries me because that means that like the throw range must be so bad, because you know, you play Street Fighter 4 for such a long time, you instinctively know the range of your throw, right? You just naturally know the range, you just do it. And the fact that he whiffed it and he had so much time to get into the range to do it, it does worry me. It probably means that it's around the same range as Cross Tekken, and I thought the range of Cross Tekken was terrible. And the reason it worries me is because it's important that the throws in general are threatening, that you're scared to be thrown. Because if throws are threatening, then it means that it's easier to frame trap the opponent and to land those counter hits. Because if the opponent's not scared of being thrown, he's not going to press buttons, so to speak. So I hope that they do improve the throw range in general, because this whole counter hit system and the throwing in general, they go hand in hand, they work together. The fact that there is a whiff throw animation tells us that it's still a command, so it's probably like light punch, light kick at the same time. Also, when you whiff a throw, you gain no EX meter from it at all. In the Daigo GamerB match, we also see that when GamerB attempts to throw Daigo, Daigo techs it from a crouching position. So we know that crouch teching is back in Street Fighter V. Now, there's a lot of animations that were borrowed from Third Strike in this game. And speaking of which, the dashes in this game, they seem very short burst. So what I mean is they don't go very far distance, but the startup and the recovery seems quite fast. And we know that when you backdash, if you get hit during the active frames, you flip up in the air, so we know you're airborne. So this feels like exactly like Street Fighter 4. So we have our invincibility frames on the startup of the backdash, and then during the active you're airborne, so if you get hit during the backdash, you're kind of like flipped and resetted in the air, so to speak. And then during the recovery frames, you're probably just grounded. The dashes themselves seem pretty short range considering how big the stages are. And speaking of stages, there's some stuff I should talk about stages. We've only seen the restaurant stage, but we know that when you knock the opponent on the left side, you'll actually knock him into the restaurant. But it doesn't affect gameplay because it begins the next round. It has to be done as a round finishing attack. We know that after you've done this, the next round, whoever was the one that got knocked into the wall starts the round on the left side, regardless of he's player 1 or player 2. And there's like, you know, P1, P2 indicators on the screen. Now one thing that kind of worried me is that after you broke the wall, I'm like, okay, well now the stage is twice as big now, so is there going to be an invisible wall on the right side now that the restaurant is open? And we couldn't see it from the Mike and Peter match, but in the Daigo Gamerby match we found out that there actually is an invisible wall that's created on the right side when you're just like halfway on the outside part of the restaurant. So we know that the stages, you know, they still make sense even after you break the wall. We've also seen there's another layer as well that you can knock your opponent into the dishes on the left side of the restaurant. And it has nothing to do with the gameplay, it's just a way to humiliate your opponent. And then we know from the Charlie trailer, or the Nash trailer, when you knock your opponent on the far right side where that bus is, you knock them right into the bus. We saw Ryu get knocked into all those seats. Okay guys, I think that does it for the mechanics video. I didn't want this to be too long, so I think we're around the half an hour mark right now. Thanks so much guys for taking the time to watch this video. I know some of this information is really obvious and kind of outdated right now, but I really want to be thorough on this whole Street Fighter V thing, and there's going to be more videos that I'll be releasing in the future. Next up, I'm planning to do an update on both Ryu and Chun-Li based on the new Taipei footage. There's some, you know, some things that kind of clarify a little stuff that we went over from before. And then, of course, I want to go over the Nash trailer and then a Charlie breakdown because it seems that a lot of you guys want to know what the character was like in the past fighting games that he was in. So, till next time, guys, peace.